Welcome to Live, Let Thrive, a podcast about the Airbnb life, the share economy, and everything in between. Here are your hosts, Myka and Steve.
Hello.
And welcome back to another exciting episode
of Live,
Let
Thrive. What's up, Myka, man?
I am good. How you doing, Stevie Stacks?
Oh, pretty good, man. Just, still going through all this craziness over here, just switching houses left and right. But, it's going to stabilize after the New Year's.
Yes, sir. What's up, yo? What episode are we on?
110 of your favorite Airbnb, VRBO, Homeaway, Turo, Lyft, all that stuff podcast, share economy podcast in the world. It's good to be here.
And we have a special guest from today coming on from the House Hacking Podcast, Mr. Andrew Kerr. Give it up for Andrew.
Woo, awesome. Thanks for having me on, guys. I'm excited to be here with you.
We're excited to have
Thanks
you,
for coming on. Yeah.
See,
go ahead.
I was excited when Myka told me about you being on the podcast because house hacking is like right up my alley. I love house hacking, and I think everybody should do it. And Myka's dabbled in it a little bit too. So we're here to learn, man. We're here, and our fans are here to learn as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think house hacking is just a phenomenal way to get involved in real estate. So if you want to sort of dip your toe into real estate, you want to grow in real estate, there's no better way to get started than house hacking. And then even if you never want to become a big real estate investor, but you just want to get ahead financially, house hacking is a great way to do it. And house hacking, really, there's a lot of fun ways to pair in Airbnb, short-term rental. My third house hack, I've actually put my guest house on Airbnb. I actually use Turo so I can drive a Mercedes for free. So it all sort of intertwines really, really nice. So
that is awesome.
Man.
So explain to us real quick what exactly house hacking is and what it means to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there's a lot of different definitions out there of what is house hacking. I really just boil it down to making a slightly different choice in your housing. That way you can reduce or completely eliminate your housing costs. And in some cases, actually reduce or eliminate your housing costs and pocket some money every month from that house hack. So it's just making a slightly different choice with your housing.
So in your house hacking, are you renting spare rooms, renting guest house, are you buying a house, living there for a couple of years and moving, or what's your method?
Yeah, so on my podcast, we sort of go through these 6 different styles of house hacking. So there's the sort of room rental house hacking where you rent out the rooms. There's the accessory dwelling unit where maybe you've got a detached garage or a pool house and you turn that into a long-term rental, or you rent it out via Airbnb, VRBO, that sort of thing. There's the income suite house hack where maybe you've got that unfinished basement that you renovate, or a mother-in-law suite that you then rent out. However, short-term rental, mid-term rental, long-term rental. Then you sort of go into that small multifamily, which is what a lot of people think of for house hacking, where you get like a duplex. You live in one side, you rent out the other, and then you can really start to get into these other things like a work-provided housing, where we've got a couple cool episodes coming up on our show where people have work basically give them a housing allowance. So that way they don't have to have any housing costs. And then there's a sort of live-in flip where you buy a property to flip it, but you live in it for a year. That way your gains are taxed as capital gains, long-term gains versus actual income. So you fix it up while you live in it. So there's all these sort of different variations. I'm living in my third house hack while we're working on our fourth. I've done the room rental. So the one I'm in right now is this sort of combination burr house hack. It's this old 1920s corner store home that we bought. We live down in New Orleans, so there's a lot of corner stores in all the different communities. We gutted it to the studs, turned it into 3 high-end apartments. We have a 2-bedroom upstairs, which me and my wife live in, a 1-bedroom, and another 2-bedroom downstairs. We rent out to long-term tenants. And then we have a guest house that is about 500 square feet that we rent out on Airbnb, VRBO, Homeaway.
Awesome. That's a lot of info there.
Quick question for you. How has the short-term rental laws affected you down in New Orleans? Because I know they're pretty strict.
Yeah, so we basically have till I can't remember, a couple months, and our license isn't being renewed. So unfortunately, we don't have it, but I'm already on my next strategy, and I'm already marketing it to traveling nurses.
Real quick, why did they decide not to renew?
Yeah, so some people think it was the hotel lobby institution that went after city council. Some folks said it was people wanted families to actually live in neighborhoods. So they just changed a lot of the regulations where you now can't have a short-term rental license if you're not in a duplex. And since we're in this multifamily, we don't qualify unless we're zoned commercial. So they essentially had about 4,500 Airbnbs operating in the city, and that number was being reduced down to 2,000. And the city council looked at it as a way to basically keep communities with residents and try to slow the pace of outside money coming into the city. Because you had folks from like New York and San Francisco that couldn't afford homes there, buying houses here and turning it all Airbnb. And, you know, as an entrepreneur, real estate investor, I'm very much on one side of it. But what really hit me is I had a friend, he had been living in this community in New Orleans called the Marigny. They bought it when they were young, in love, just getting married. And then over this sort of 6-year period, it went from his whole street being families to when him and his wife left, every single house was Airbnb. And every weekend it was bachelor and bachelorette parties. You know, and they went from young and single to having 2 young daughters. And that's why they ended up leaving. So like, I get it where there's this like pull of each side of like these whole swaths of neighborhoods are becoming short-term rental. And then you're losing the people that actually live there. So I see both sides of it, but you know, if you're a good entrepreneur, you'll figure out how to make money either way. And you know, we're already getting travel nurses lined up to come in and stay in 3 months chunks. So it's going to work out well.
Good idea, man. You're already on top of it. Man.
Nice, man.
Yeah. So what you said you were working on a strategy. What is your new strategy that you were saying? What was it besides the nurses?
Yeah. So, you know, basically corporate housing, short-term housing, since we've had it as an Airbnb, and it's already furnished. We've got pots, pans, all that stuff in there. What we're doing is just renting it out to short-term nurses. And then we found a couple other websites, one called Furnish Finder, where you can actually list it for longer periods of time. We're going to keep our place on Airbnb and VRBO, but change the minimum stay to 30 days. Mm-hmm. So then we'll be able to still qualify to be on there and not run into any issues with the city. So we're just sort of looking at that of the midterm. And then, you know, we actually like that better because now when family and friends come, we can still say, hey, you know what? We have a traveling nurse staying January through March. It's open in April. So all of our friends come and stay in it in April. And then in May, it's going back to a traveling nurse. So we're just doing a slight shift from very short term, you know, a couple nights to a week to that midterm of 30 days to 3-4 months of a rental on it.
Now, have you had any luck with Furnish Finder yet?
Yeah. So we just listed it up on there. And I mean, luckily we've got several hospitals right by us, but man, I've been getting requests every single day and people are ready to move in before we're even ready for it. You know, we still are going through our last batch of short-term guests. So far it's been working out really well. And then there's another Facebook group. It's like Gypsy Traveling Nurses that we're going to start marketing in when we get closer to our availability date. It's all for traveling nurses and landlords that rent to traveling nurses.
And how big is the unit that you're going to rent out to traveling nurses?
It's about 550 square feet. So it's a little unique in the fact that it's this 2-story studio style apartment and it has a 1-car garage. So when we built it, nice. We wanted to have a garage and off-street parking for us. And then the fact that it has laundry in it, it has a garage, tons of storage. The reception that I've got so far is they don't care that it's tinier because it's New Orleans. They're going to be working all the time, and then they want to go out and have fun and see the city. So it's sort of this perfect, bigger than a hotel room, but not a full-size apartment. So far it seems to be working out pretty well for us.
And how much you plan on charging a month?
Yeah, we have it listed at $900 a month. And we were making, I think we'll end up netting about $8,000 to $9,000 from Airbnb on it for this year, and only having it rented about 120 nights. So we should make just about the same. And, my view is have a slightly better tenant base where, if someone there for 3 months, I get a bigger security deposit. I don't have to send in cleaners every single week, that sort of thing. So.
Because here's my thing with it, and I've spoken with Myka about this, because I have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,500 square foot house that I'm trying to market to Furnish Finder, travel nurses, but to them it's too much house. They're traveling with 1 or 2 people maybe, and they want to spend around that sweet spot is anywhere between $900 to $1,200. They don't want to spend anything over that. They want all bills, all utilities, and everything paid. So the smaller units, man, those are golden in that part of the rental community.
Well, what you might be able to do is actually rent it by the room. I've seen some landlords do that where they'll say, look, we've got 3 bedrooms. If you want the whole thing, it's this. Otherwise, you can rent a room for $800. And just so you know, the other 2 rooms are going to be rented out to traveling nurses as well. And some folks have had a really good success with that. But yeah, it does seem like that sweet spot is like a studio to 2 bedroom.
Yeah.
So quick question for you, because here in Arlington, people are getting fined for renting rooms out of their home that they actually live in. And I was wondering, do you guys have that same issue there? Are you guys still allowed to rent if you live on premises, can you still rent a room?
Yeah, I haven't researched it too much here. They were limiting, even when we still have the short-term rental license, they capped the capacity for the home. So my understanding was same thing when you're renting by the room, they would still cap the capacity. So like if me and my wife are living in one room, we wanted to rent the other room, that we couldn't put 4 other people in that room and like put an air mattress in there, even if they were okay with it. So yeah, it's just been really screwy. Like in the past 3 years, there's been several city ordinances that sort of keep changing, and they keep adding in more fees and taxes. And I'm really wondering what's going to happen, because they're counting on this revenue, but they essentially just cut the number of units in half. So now all of a sudden they're going to be shortfall on this revenue. And like, again, I see both sides of the argument, but I think what ends up happening is you have politicians making laws that they fully don't understand the repercussions of it. So,
or they just don't care.
Yeah.
They got paid off by the hotel lobbies already, so they're good, even if they hurt the city. But that's just our opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of people's opinion, right? with politicians in general, it's whether you're left leaning or you're right leaning, you always seem to hate the other side, and both sides seem to be a little corrupt.
There you go, man. Follow the money. So are you related to Steve Kerr?
God, I wish, man. I get that asked all the time. Man, yeah, I was a little bit of a Bulls fan growing up. When I played basketball, junior league basketball, I actually got number 23 from Michael Jordan as my jersey number. But yeah, no relation to Steve Kerr.
So a question for you, because I noticed you said you got a Mercedes that you use Turo with. How has the Turo market worked for you? And would you say it's profitable, and how's it been working for you?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I was tweaking it a bit, and it was really just by accident. We moved to New Orleans like 4 years ago for a multitude of reasons. I wanted to start investing in another state. I had an opportunity to come here for some nonprofit work that I wanted to do. We love this city, and one of the things we wanted is to be able to walk and bike everywhere. I mean, within 5 blocks, we got like bars and restaurants, music venues, streetcar, restaurant. So what ended up happening was I tend to be slightly more frugal. I had a Fiat, and I was barely driving it. I would use maybe half a tank of gas for the whole month. So I sort of said, I've seen this Turo thing. Let me post it on Turo. And it just started renting out. I started renting it sort of to anyone and everyone. I found that was too much work. So then I started to scale it back, do like a minimum 2-night rental or 2-day rental, adjusted my price after I got some reviews. And what ended up happening after my first year with my Fiat, I think I made like 3,500, $4,000, and it didn't cause any inconvenience in my life at all. And then I've been really wanting this Mercedes, and I sort of said, okay, what if I use Turo? I'm big on having other people pay for my stuff. So like, the property we live in is like a little over $600,000 property, and we gross about 40 grand on it, which covers all our mortgage and puts some money in our pocket. So we're living for free. I said, look, can I do this also for a car? So I had this idea of, I wanted a GLA. It's their sort of coupe, compact SUV style car. And I said, cars depreciate a lot, so let me look at a 2-year-old car. So this car, brand new, would have cost $48,000. I found it 2 years old with an extended warranty, certified pre-owned, with 22,000 miles on it for $26,000. And I looked at the loan and I said, okay, I've got cash I could buy it with, but I want to save that to do more real estate deals. So I looked at the loan and I looked at the payment and I said, could I put this car on Turo once a month and then fully rent out my fiat, and that will essentially have the car paid for, have the maintenance, have the insurance. I think on this year on Turo, I'll end up making just under $7,000, which covered all of my costs for that Mercedes. So now me and my wife, when we go on a road trip or go to the beach or drive back to North Carolina to visit family, we take the Mercedes. So it's sort of a nice way to, and I'm writing up an article for my website about it, but how I drive a Mercedes for almost free. But yeah, so it works well. I mean, New Orleans is a tourist destination. I don't know how well Turo would work. I also do other things, like I don't do airport runs. I tried that once or twice and I realized, like, man, that sucks. Like, people's flights get delayed. They got to wait for their baggage, the key exchange. I was spending all this time and it just wasn't working well. It was taking like an hour and a half for me to do a pickup, and then I would have to have them drop me off or do an Uber. So it's evolved over time, where now, I'm going in my 3rd year with it, and it's worked out pretty well.
Have you offered like your car to like your Airbnb guests?
I have, and oddly enough, the Turo always gets booked basically last minute. It's like, hey, we're booking, we're coming in on Friday and it's, Monday, so we're going to go ahead and book it. Where the Airbnb seems to get booked out, like I had my Mardi Gras booking in February, came in, I think, last August. So, people are booking out those big events, Mardi Gras, Jazz Fest, they're booking out minimum 3 months, if not 6 months out.
Wow.
Maybe it'll be more ideal for travel nurses.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a pretty cool thing where, hey, if you're coming in, do you want a car to have for the 3 months that while you're here, or to use, a week, a month or something. So we'll see how it'll work out in the future. But yeah, I don't know how Turo would work in a non-touristy area. I mean, every place has some tourists, but New Orleans gets millions of visitors a year. So it seems to be working out pretty well.
Okay, so you have 3 houses that you're renting out, and you're working on your 4th one, right? You're living in the 4th one.
Yep.
How has your wife been on board with hopping from house to house?
Yeah, so this was a good question. When we met, I was a real estate investor. I bought my first house at 20. I'm 37 now. This house hack that we're in right now, was our first property together, and it was her first home ever, So there was definitely this rub when we were buying it. I actually bought the property, went under contract on it without telling my wife, just with the idea of like, hey, I have tons of investment property. I've owned, I got up to about 40 doors before I started selling off a lot of stuff. I said, look, this is a good deal. There's a lot of value add. There can be rental income. So I went under contract on it. And then I approached my wife of, hey, we moved to New Orleans. Let's look at this house hacking thing, which I'd done before. And if we do this a couple of times, then this gets us our dream home. As a couple, the way we work our finances is she has her money, I have my money, then we jointly have money. So the idea was, let's do 2-3 house hacks together, and now they can pay for our dream home that you really want. So I had to sort of sell her on that idea. There's definitely some conflict when we were working on the house. Like we'd go to the tile section, she would look at stuff based on aesthetics and design, and she has amazing taste. But I would go in and go to the tile section that's like $1.99 a square foot. And I would find her looking at the $20 a square foot stuff. So, she was looking at making a home. I was looking at it from an investment. So we had to sort of get on the same page with that. But now it's worked out beautifully. My fourth house hack, her second house hack, she found the property. She knew the criteria that we needed to make a deal work. She found it on the MLS. I did the negotiating, got us under contract. I'm working with the architect, working with the contractors. I give her all the design stuff. We need exterior paint, interior paint. We need this much in tile. We need tile in these places. And then she takes all the design parts of it. So it ends up now, I feel like it's a pretty good team that we've developed with it.
Nice.
And then also with, the house hack that we're living in, while the space is small, she didn't really have to sacrifice. We got like a farmhouse sink in the kitchen. We've got original 1920s hardwood floors that are restored. We've got a jacuzzi soaker tub in the bathroom, tile floor. So, while it's a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, it's definitely a higher end apartment. So she didn't have to sacrifice on a lot of her creature comforts. And, that's something I'm trying to convey with house hacking is, there's that room rental style house hack where you have to make some sacrifices. And you can do that when you're younger, when you don't need a lot of creature comforts. But when you get older, there's all these different cool ways you can do house hacking and still save money, reduce your housing costs, and do that house hack without having to make those big sacrifices.
I take it helps to be a little minimalistic whenever you're doing house hacking.
Yeah, it definitely does. With mine, when we did this Burr house hack combo, we're definitely down on space a little bit. But our new house hack, we're going from a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom to a 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom. And she's getting a walk-in closet that's like 7 feet wide and 14 feet long. So depending on the style of the house hack, it helps if you can be a little frugal, a little minimalistic. But if you do it right, you can do a great house hack and not have to give up on those creature comforts.
Wow. Man, you really have it going. So you're on your fourth. How many more do you plan on doing before you guys get that dream home? Or are you already in the dream home?
Yeah, the new one will be pretty close to a dream home for her. We'll have a giant master suite upstairs, multiple bedrooms, extra bathrooms. I would like to do 1 or 2 more. When we move out of our current house hack, that'll give us about $1,000, $1,200 a month in cash flow. And then this fourth one, when we move out of that, that'll give us about $800 to $1,000. So between those two, that'll be $2,000 a month. So if we do a third one and get somewhere in that $2,500 to $3,000 total, even in a high cost of living area, $2,500, $3,000 a month can get you a pretty nice place to live. And if you live in a more reasonable area, $2,500 a month can get you a pretty phenomenal home.
Oh, nice.
And are you only investing in New Orleans?
No. So I actually grew up in North Carolina, and that's where I built up my whole portfolio up to the 40 doors. And what I've really done over the past 3 years is pretty much sell off everything. And now I invest primarily just in bigger syndications. So I've got money invested in, I don't even know all the different states now. Yeah. So wherever a private REIT is doing a syndication, I'll invest in it.
So at one point you had 40 units?
Yep.
Wow. And did you do that by house hacking, or how did you accumulate those?
Yeah, so a couple of it was house hacking. I did a lot of affordable housing and then college rentals, and that's where I really sort of built my niche. I used to do a lot of aid work and did work overseas in places like Kenya, Haiti, Indonesia, along with here in the U.S. So I did a lot of this working in very poor communities, helping do rebuilding. So this idea of working in that sort of C-class area to me was just really easy. I felt comfortable in it, and you could buy really, really cheap. We were buying, a quad for $80,000, $90,000 that was bringing in $2,000 a month in gross rents. So it really helped me scale up pretty quickly. And then I had some good family friends that invested with me and were private investors on a lot of those deals. So it really helped me scale up. But yeah, it was a great niche in college rentals and that affordable housing.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and so this was in North Carolina where you were doing the getting the triplexes in for like 89,000. You said.
Yep.
Wow, what part of North Carolina?
The triangle. So Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill. My first house I bought at 20 was a townhouse in Morrisville, which is a little suburb of Raleigh, the capital.
So I have a question about townhomes real quick. Is it true that they don't appreciate as much?
Yeah, it really depends on the area. I think you're a little more capped, but like that townhouse I bought at 20, I think when I bought it for like 120, 125, and I sold it for 154, 155, something like that, over, I think maybe I lived in it 4 years, something like that. So, it definitely appreciated. It doesn't seem to appreciate as much as maybe a traditional single family home, but you got to look what you wanted. When I bought it at 20, I didn't want to have to do any yard work. So the fact that I could be in a townhouse and not have to do anything outside, that was perfect. That was exactly what I wanted. So,
Did you rent them out on Section 8?
Not that townhouse, but the affordable housing in Durham, I did do some Section 8.
How'd that work out?
I actually loved it. There's a lot of misconceptions about there of, Section 8 tenants are always bad people. They're bad tenants. Just because someone has Section 8 and you take Section 8 doesn't mean you have to approve them. You can still put them through your whole entire screening process. What it just means is a large portion of their rent is guaranteed. And for me, what I found, I could get a Section 8 tenant. I would vet them. I might only take 1 out of 3 folks that qualify, but I was essentially getting the top bracket of sort of low income housing folks, and they had that guaranteed income. So to me, it worked out really well. I'd still have a problem tenant, just like I would with a normal other tenant, but I like the fact that a portion of the rent was guaranteed.
Nice.
But it's tough, man. If you only do like college rental or you do really A-class housing, going into affordable housing is tough. It's a different mindset. It's a very high-touch tenant base. But, for me, I found it super rewarding. Like the threshold and the bar was set so low, is so easy for me to succeed. I mean, like, just to give you guys some stories, I was buying a property and I was walking in, the tenant's toilet didn't work. They were literally filling up a bucket in their bathtub and pouring it in the toilet to flush.
Wow.
That's how we flush toilets like overseas. Like you did bucket showers and bucket flushing that way. It was a $20 toilet flapper rebuild kit from Lowe's and took me 10 minutes to fix it. I did that on day 1 of owning the property. That tenant loved me because they had been living like that for 3, 4, 5 months. I had another tenant. I don't do carpet anymore and haven't for a while, but back then I didn't know to not do a lot of carpet. I put in carpet. I did the cheap, builder's grade carpet on the back wall of Lowe's, and I put in the renter's pad underneath. The tenant walked into the room and was sort of bouncing around, and then she just got a little teary-eyed that was getting ready to move in. And I said, well, what's wrong? You don't like the carpet? And she goes like, it's so soft. Like, oh my goodness, this carpet is so luxurious. She'd never been in carpet where there's where there's a pad underneath it. It had always been absolute cheap carpet right on the floor. So it was like those little things that like I just did what I felt any normal landlord should do. I didn't pick high-end fixtures, but it just helped me set the bar. The bar was set so low. I came in and just did normal stuff, and I still made mistakes. The tenants loved me. They said, Andrew, they'd always say, hey, Andrew will throw you out and file eviction without thinking twice. But, man, he takes care of his properties. If there's something wrong and you call him, he'll get a guy out there to fix it right away. So when I had those affordable housings, I never spent a dime. Or I take that back. I think I spent $200 on a yard sign when I first started, but I never had to put it out because soon as – in the areas that I invested in, soon as a unit started becoming empty and I started doing work on it, I would have a dozen applications before I even finished the work because everyone would be like, oh, you got to rent to my cousin or my friend, his landlord's crap. I know, I see you working down there. I have someone that's really, really good for you. So it was just this word of mouth where I acted like a decent landlord and it worked out incredibly well for me.
You get out what you put in, man. That is definitely the truth.
You just treat people right and it comes back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and with Section 8, I mean, is there pretty stringent rules and guidelines from the city that how you have to make the house and everything like that?
Sort of yes and no. If you're a slumlord, they will seem like evil people, right? They're going to come in and walk in your apartments. I never had issues with them coming into my apartments for the inspections because I actually took care of everything. Every now and then they'd come in and maybe find something and I'd be like, oh, I missed that on my walkthrough. Thanks. I'll get the maintenance guy out here, this afternoon. So to me, it wasn't bad. I also really big on relationship building. So I built a relationship with the folks at the city. And they said, Andrew, we know you actually take care of your stuff, so we're not going to be overly hard with you. So for me, it wasn't an issue because I actually just took care of my properties. But yeah, if you're a slumlord, you probably hated them and hated the dreaded inspection.
Mm.
So you also mentioned something that me and Steve were actually talking about this a while ago. You were saying you do college student rentals. How are you going about finding your college students to put inside of your rentals?
Yeah, so I just sold off my last college rental here March of this year. Tried to do a 1031, but the 1031 failed out. That's a whole nother conversation. But so in North Carolina by NC State and Chapel Hill, it's
Tar
pretty
Heels.
common to, yeah, definitely Tar Heels. To rent by the room, and there's a lot of property management companies that are specifically geared towards college rentals. So I really didn't actually have to do it. I used property managers for my college rentals. My second house hack, I had tenants already in my college rental that I lived in. And then when I moved out, I turned it over to a property manager. But it was in most college areas, it's really, really common to find those property management companies that specialize in college rentals. And what I did is I had these 4-bedroom, 4-bathroom units, and we rented them by the room, and it worked out really, really well. So, we were buying these like 4-bedroom, 4-bathroom condos. I think the cheapest I got one was like $90K. I think the most expensive I paid was like $115 or $120, but I ended up selling them for $160, $170. But when we were renting them, they were bringing in $1,600, $1,700 a month for these places that were costing, a little over $100,000 because we were renting by the room.
You see, Myka, it ain't all about appreciation, man. Get some cash flow like that, it don't even matter.
And that's where, early on, I needed the cash flow. That's why I didn't mind doing the work in that affordable housing. That's why I like college rental. If it didn't have drastic appreciation, that's fine. And now that I've got more appreciation, I'm doing these more value add deals that are adding, chunks of money to my net worth, which I'm okay with because I've got the cash flow to cover me in my basic financial foundation. Sometimes you want appreciation, sometimes you want cash flow. If you can get both, that's the best case scenario. But early on, if someone wanted to do a deal like that, and I'd say, look, if you're struggling to get by or you like your job and, you can bring in $500 a month in cash flow, that can help you pay off your car quicker, pay off student loan, do that cash flow deal. Even if it might only average appreciation of 1% a year or 2% a year versus that deal that could appreciate 5, 6, 7, 8% a year, but it's going to have no cash flow.
Yeah.
All right, real quick, because you mentioned it, the failed 1031 exchange, because that seems like to be everything, on every real estate show you listen to. It's 1031 exchange. That's you'll never pay taxes ever in your history of investing. Blah blah. I guess it's not 100% a gimme.
Yeah, so I've done a couple 1031 exchange. So the first one worked out really well. I had sold one property and used the proceeds to buy 3 other properties. It worked out beautifully. I was able to really scale and leverage up, buy more doors, buy more property. But this second one, I essentially had this college rental, which I mentioned just a bit ago that I sold there in March. I knew I could sell it really, really quick. The market was hot. These were in high demand. I knew if I put it on the market on a Thursday, I'd be under contract on Sunday. So what I did is I started looking for my replacement property first. And then once I found my replacement property, I then sold my other property and had that close before I closed on my replacement one. But what ended up happening is I sold the property, and the new property I was buying, Mother's Day, there was a giant rainstorm and there's flash flooding. water went in the property that I was getting ready to buy, and I was supposed to close in on Wednesday. So literally that whole deal fell apart. I couldn't find another property that I liked, and then my period when I can name a replacement property ran out. So on that one, I ended up having to pay some of the taxes. It's not the end of the world. I'm actually doing a cost segment study on one of my other properties, so that will give me a lot of depreciation that will offset my gain on this other one. So it should end up as a wash for the year. But I don't mind sharing my failures, because a lot of times everyone thinks it always works, it's always beautiful, and sometimes it just doesn't, and you got to roll with the punches. But yeah, that 1031 failed there.
Well, see, I wouldn't exactly call it a failure. Maybe the 1031 failed, but still you're paying taxes on the profit. So you still profited though, right?
Yeah, and that's when people complain about paying taxes, especially a lot of taxes. Like, come on, man, you can't complain too much. If you're paying a lot of taxes, that means you made a lot of money, right?
Wow. So it failed and went through. So I have a question. I guess when it failed, did it fail after you had already sold your old properties?
Yeah. So
okay.
The dates, I can't remember the dates exactly, but essentially I think I sold the property beginning like first, second week of April. And then, I went under contract on the new property I wanted like April 1. And then I put my condo that I was selling in North Carolina on the market. It was under contract. We sold it right in middle of April. My new property that I was supposed to close on was like that right there in middle of May. So it sold. All the proceeds went actually into the 1031. I didn't walk away with any cash. When you have a 1031, the money actually goes into that exchange. They hold it and then send it to the closing attorney for the replacement property you buy. So then, when that new deal didn't go through, they essentially sat on that money for that period. Well, I tried to look for a new deal, and I probably could have placed it in some stuff. I just didn't like the option. So instead of doing a bad deal, I just said, I'll close out the exchange. I notified the intermediary that, I can't find a replacement property. I'm just going to go ahead and close out the 1031, and do the distribution to me, and I'll owe the taxes on it.
And what's the tax rate on that?
Short-term capital gain, so 15% for federal.
That's still better than what they're taking from everybody's paycheck every month, right?
Yeah, way better than ordinary income. So, again, it's not the end of the world. It would have been nice if I could have rolled that in, and then whenever I sold that property 5-10 years down the road, rolled it into another one. That's like the perfect scenario, right? Is you sell 1031 until you die and pass on the property to heirs, and never have to pay taxes on it. But yeah, it wasn't the end of the world by any means.
Right. And here's one thing that, because you mentioned, like a lot of people we interview, they do buy and holds and, do Airbnb, stuff like that. So you weren't afraid to do a sell-off, to get rid of I wouldn't say you had a bunch of dogs, but when do you know it's time to clean house and to possibly get rid of dogs?
Yeah, so part of it is just my life change, right? I bought my first property at 20, 37 now. I got married in the past year, got really serious with my girlfriend, who then became my fiance and wife. When I was doing my affordable housing, I was managing all those tenants. I was managing 24 tenants on my own. That was a lot of work. I was doing a lot of the work myself. I just went through these stages of, I did all the work, I did the maintenance, I did the rehab, to where I started outsourcing the work. I did the property management, started outsourcing that. And then as I started building up some wealth, I said, I can be lazy. I can vet a person and vet their deal and then invest in their deal and still make basically the same return without having to do work, all the work that I was. So part of that was just my life shifted and how I wanted to spend my time and spend the time with my wife. And we really love to travel. We've been to like 34, 35 different countries. So we like to put our time in other places. So that was part of it. And then the other thing that really hit for me was people were willing to buy properties that I would not buy the property for. So literally it was just crazy where people were paying what they were willing to pay. I just said the numbers wouldn't work for me to buy it. this just doesn't feel right. Obviously I could have held on. Like I sold off those 24 units in end of 2016. I probably could have held on for another year or two and maybe made 10% more. But to me, just with the way my life was changing, and then the combination of hey, these don't make sense if someone new were to buy them at this value. So why don't I collect the profit? I had this really early mentor. He said, you can never time the market. You're never going to time the bottom. You're never going to time the top. If you can just get good at taking a chunk out of the middle and realizing that you're never going to get all of it, and just be happy with taking those chunks out of the middle, do that. So that's sort of this philosophy I had of like, I bought here, I sold here. If I sell here, make a ton of money, investors make a ton of money, and let's take that profit. If it goes up for another 3 or 4 years, so be it. But let me make that cash and find other ways to reinvest it into deals that seem like better deals.
That's smart. That's really smart.
I like that. Yeah, you can't time the top and you can't time the bottom. I like that.
I guess it kind of reminds me of I had a friend that, I don't know, something happened. A friend of hers gave her a guitar, like this old wooden guitar, old acoustic. And she found out it was worth some money. And anyways, she found out it was worth, I don't know, about like $500 or something like that, which to her was a lot of money at the time. But she was like, I don't know if I want to sell it. I kind of like playing it a little bit, this and that. I'm like, okay, well, look at it like this. Would you go out to the store and if you saw that guitar, would you pay $500 for it? And she's like, no. I'm like, well, maybe you should sell it for that $500.
Yeah, sell the $500, buy the $50 or $100.
Yeah, get you a $50 guitar.
Yeah.
It's kind of similar to what you said. People were willing to pay a lot more than you would pay for those houses.
Yeah, and I mean, part of it is like spend your time what's going to bring you value, put your money what brings you value, and that changes over time too. So what's okay for you right now might not be okay for you in 3 or 4 or 5 years. So it's all do what you feel is right for you, and that changes over time.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
When would you say is the right time to refinance?
Man. So I think this is a little different for everyone else. In 2016 and 2017, I sold some properties. I started looking at deleveraging. So, when I was early in my investing career, I had no problem being leveraged to the tilt, right? Like if I could get 100% financing, let's do it. Like 80% from the bank, 20% private money, no problem. I don't mind that risk. But then as I started to build up my financial base, I started to be, getting engaged, being married, being responsible for someone else. I didn't want 80% is too risky for me. I like having a 60, 70% LTV across a portfolio. To me, that feels the right level. So, early on, I would refinance as much as I could to pull out cash to get the next deal. But now it all really depends. So with my third house hack, we bought the property with hard money and did the rehab. We put in a bunch of our own cash. The hard money also paid for the rehab. Once we were done, we refinanced out to the 30-year fixed to get the big chunk out of it done. So that was our refinance timing. And then same thing with this new property that we bought. We bought it with FHA financing because it's gonna be our primary residence. Once we get in, we do the work, we do this expansion that we're doing on it, adding square footage, the value is drastically going to go up. We'll refinance to get rid of that monthly PMI, and we'll pull out the cash that we put in. So, we still might have $10,000 or $20,000 into the deal, but we'll pull back out, 80% of the cash that we put into it. So that's sort of our refinance timing on it. So a lot of it, I think, depends on the person and depends on the deal. So I guess that's sort of a long answer to your question, when to refinance.
I actually like that, though. You said 60 to 70. I never thought about having 60 to 70 LTV across your portfolio. So I learned something out of that.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's what your risk tolerance is when you have, when I was in my late 20s, I didn't have a lot to risk. So if I'm being over leveraged, the way I looked at it is, hey, I'm young. I can still work. I can still earn. I'm not responsible for anyone. If I have to file bankruptcy, who cares? I know I'll start over again. Where now, no way. I also feel we're closer to the top of a market. you know, maybe we're a year out or maybe we're 5 years out, but where we're at, I'd rather not be over leveraged in this case.
Wow, that's a good one. Okay, because I've been thinking about refinancing. I'm like, yeah, is it a good time to? And how do you feel about refinancing to a higher interest rate, or do you feel like you should always refi to a lower interest rate?
No, I mean, if you're getting to pull cash out, right? I mean, so maybe you're at a 4% and you can go, or you're at 3.5% and your new cash out will be at 4%. But if it pulls out 50 grand, that will then let you go, buy 2 other properties that can get you the cash flow. It might make sense. My simple advice would be go do the math, see what that difference in the payment is and then what that cash flow can do. And you just want to make sure if you can pull out cash that you then go invest will get you a higher return than what you're making on it. So, I mean, real estate is sort of this art and science, right? You got to do the math, you got to run your numbers, but then the art side of it is like this property that I bought, it was under contract and it fell out of contract because there's too many problems. I saw broken sewer lines. I saw knob and tube wiring as an opportunity. I saw this guest house garage building. No one knew what to do with it. I said, because the way the first floor was, there wasn't enough space to build a staircase to get to the upstairs where the 500 or 400 square feet was. There's about 100 downstairs. And I said, code actually says if you go in and read it, you can do a spiral staircase. So that's this art side of it of like, how can you be creative to make it work, to add value? And we are able to do that. Same thing with this new deal we're working on, this house hack. It's a double, and each side is 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, and upstairs it's like a 1.5 story. So there's a small room upstairs, but on one side there's a hatch that goes into this attic space. Everyone else ignored it. I looked at it and said, we can expand into this space and I can add on maybe 300 to 400 square feet of living space. It might cost me $100 or $150 a square foot to build out that space and modify it, but it'll appraise at $230, $240 a square foot. So all of a sudden it creates this value add there. So that's this like art side of real estate that's important, where you got to know your numbers, know how to run them, but then you got to have this creative side to make deals work.
And see, I guess that's where I see that it was an advantage when you were young and you were you weren't afraid to be leveraged to, leverage as high as you can get leveraged because you were learning, you were getting the reps in, right?
Yeah.
And so you were learning how to do the rehabs. I mean, and how else are you going to learn? You can't just sit on one house for 10 years and wait till you can buy the next one. You're not going to get the reps in, but the more houses you did, the more efficient you became, and the little hacks here and there, you could use. And so, it's good to get those reps in early, I guess.
Yeah, that's why I love house hacking for folks. If you think you want to get into real estate, do a house hack, because you start to buy a property, you start to have to do work. Even if it doesn't need a ton of work, you're going to have to do maintenance requests. You're going to have to market to tenants. It just helps you learn about it. And as you're saying, you get those reps in and then you realize, real estate's not for me. Or you realize like, hey, I can do this. Or I like this part of it and I don't like managing the tenant. So I know the deals I do need to be able to sustain a property management company. So it helps you sort of figure out what you want. But yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate for a couple of reasons. One was I was able to do some deals with low barriers to entry and I didn't mind taking risks. I also had a couple of really great mentors that helped me from making a lot of mistakes early on, which I'm still really fortunate of. And that's why I wanted to create my podcast. Was I had some folks that really guided me and helped me, and I wanted to make the podcast, I'm sure like you guys do, was to help other people, help spread that knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense.
Definitely.
So real quick, some tips on dealing with contractors and rehabbing a house. I mean, is there some, some guidelines you can give us?
Yeah, be very, very specific and be as detailed as possible. If you think you are being over detailed, then you're probably doing it right. And just to give you an example, there's a contractor that I use for my third house hack. I really love him, and I'm using him for my fourth one. He's a great general contractor. He's an investor himself. He has, I think, 6 or 7 Airbnbs. Like, he gets what we're trying to do. But here's a perfect example. I said, we're using this blue for all the siding, and we want to paint all the trim white. So he interpreted painting the trim as doors, siding, all the exterior molding, and he painted the garage door. He didn't consider the garage door as trim, and he painted that a different color. And it was just this thing where what he thought I wanted was one thing and what I wanted was another thing, where now I just sent him the exterior paint colors for my new project and the interior paint colors. And I was super specific. I said, exterior siding, anything that's wood siding, I want this color. Trim, and by trim, I mean these moldings, this, and this. So the more clear you can be, when I think you leave stuff up for interpretation, that's when there's issues, and a contractor will do one thing, or even if they have good intentions, there can be mistakes. But then it also opens you up if you're working with less than ethical people to potentially take advantage of you there. So I think the more detailed and specific and clear you can get, and then also always have written contracts. So I just did a change order. I said, hey, I want to make this change on this property. We want to modify the staircase. He got me a bid. I said, great, I like the bid. I signed it. He signed it. And then we modified our big running estimate total for everything. So there's email chain, there's signed documentation. That way I know him, I worked with him, I like him, I trust him, but the documentation's there. That way if there ever is a problem, you've got it all in writing.
That's smart.
Man.
Nice, man.
Learned a lot today from you, Andrew.
Yeah, man.
Definitely taking notes.
The wealth of knowledge. All right. So someone's in their 20s. They're considering getting into real estate, doing house hacking. What would you suggest be like their first purchase? Or how would you go about that? Second, maybe third, fourth?
Yeah, I would say do a room rental house hack, or do a one of the other styles of house hack combined with room rental. So if you can find a small multifamily like a duplex, that's really, or a triplex or a quad, that's really the perfect scenario. So you rent out those 3 other units to long-term tenants, and then when you're living in your unit, do room rentals as well. So as an example, if you buy a duplex and say it's 3 bedroom, 1 bathroom on each side, the other side you rent out to your long-term tenant, you live in your side, live in the master bedroom, so you're nice, comfy, it's better than the dorm room or the crappy apartment that you had. Then your other 2 rooms rent out to friends. And now you're really making cash flow on it. Or, maybe you're in the frat house or the sorority, or you're in that dorm suite with 4 people. Go buy that cheap 4 or 5 bedroom house, and then you live in one room, rent out all the other rooms, and get that cash flow. Because, when we're in our 20s, we don't need to have luxury. I mean, we've been used to living very cheaply. So, don't get all those creature comforts yet, and keep having that same living situation that you were in, living with multiple roommates, and keep doing that going forward as long as you can.
Nice. And then eventually just move out of that house and then just rent the whole thing out, right?
Yeah.
And see, and I guess, did you mention it in the show already? Because when you do hop to the next one, you only got to put 3% down, 5% maybe.
Yeah, depending on with your loan term, I mean, you can do as little as 3.5% down. So, I mean, that's where a lot of folks don't think they can buy a house. But, I mean, on a $200,000 house with an FHA loan, that's $7,000. You'll need some closing costs and some other money at the table, but you can negotiate that into your contract to have the seller to pay some of that for you. Most college kids, if you hustle for a year, or even folks when they're 20, go drive Uber, go drive Lyft, go do Postmates food delivery. Like, you can come up with $7,000 or $8,000 in a year if you actually hustle, right? And then now you can go do your house hack, and now all of a sudden you've reduced your housing cost to nothing, and maybe you're making some money on there as well.
It's a beautiful thing.
Dude, I tell people with house hacking is like, if you can cut your living expenses, especially your rent and mortgage, it definitely puts you farther ahead.
Yeah,
apparently, yeah.
I was going to say, we just did this post on our Instagram where I'm trying to remember the exact numbers now, but it was basically like from 22 to 32, you house hack, like a short period of your life. And if you did it for the first 5 years on your own, then you got married and you did it with your partner for the next 5 years, and you each just maxed out your IRAs, you can end up with a $1.4 million retirement account. So it's like, you don't have to house hack forever, but like just for 10 years. And you can do different styles of house hacks where you can sort of upgrade your living as you go on. But, just doing that extra, reducing your housing costs by $500 a month can make a huge impact in your financial future.
Man,
Big time.
really?
Yeah, I'm currently on my fourth house right now, just doing the house hacking thing. So
What?
yeah, I can attest to it.
All right, well, we're going to get you on our show then to talk about your house hacking experience.
Yeah, it's been.
He does it.
I've been doing it, and then I've been Airbnb the previous houses. So it's it's worked on both fronts until they started banning every city that I had a house in. Now I can't really Airbnb anymore.
And that's, something just to call out. If you're thinking of doing short-term rental, you really got to get clued into your local laws, and you got to stay on top of it. And several people have gotten hurt or going to get hurt where they buy a property that doesn't make sense as a long-term rental. Airbnb, then the law changes, and now all of a sudden, it just doesn't make sense. Hopefully you can sell that property and make some appreciation and get your money back. But it's just something as a real estate investor, we really need to be mindful of like New Orleans. I knew it could potentially happen. It ended up happening. It sucks that it's happening, but let's move on. Let's figure out a new strategy. And then if it doesn't work, let's have multiple potential exits so we can still make our money.
I'm happy you said that, because that is starting to become a very common mistake. The people not running long-term numbers, grabbing these properties just for the purpose of Airbnb, and it turns into a crapshoot real quick. So, yeah, that's a tip for everyone out there. If you're doing that, be very careful with your numbers when you're running the whole Airbnb thing.
Yeah, man, I'm sorry that's happening to you, Steve. What's your strategy? What do you think you're going to do going forward? Convert them to long-term rental, or possibly sell, or what's your thought?
I've been converting them to long-term rentals, so cool. they make sense as long-term rentals. Awesome. Also, I made more money doing Airbnb, but at least I could do that. Yeah. And like, it's less headache. Airbnb, it's a little more work, and plus the cleaning fees and all that. So the difference might not even be that big, but definitely, I've just been switching them to long-term rentals and travel nurses. Trying to attract travel nurses.
Awesome. Well, something I actually didn't mention. So I actually don't manage my Airbnb. Sort of as life circumstances change, I didn't want to manage the day-to-day. So I started, when we put our Airbnb in place, I used a company called Evolve. So they're a short-term rental property management company. They put you on all the big places, TripAdvisor, Airbnb, VRBO, Homeaway. They do take a property management fee, but they essentially have a call center. I think they speak like 6 or 7 different languages in the call center. They curate your listing for you. They do all the responses. When a booking does come in, I get an email saying a booking's come in. They also email my cleaner, who then adds it to the cleaner's calendar. So it's sort of a cool way where, if you want to do Airbnb and you can do it in your city, don't feel like you have to do the cleaning. You can hire cleaners. Don't feel like you have to do the property management. There's companies out there that specialize in that too, where if you just want to make the cash flow and, you've got the extra money there, but don't have the time, there's still ways to do short-term rentals.
How did Evolve work out for you? Because I get mixed reviews on them.
I personally think it's worked out great. And
okay,
where I've seen people have problems with Evolve and other property management is they think it's completely like set it and forget it, right? Mm-hmm. You still need to mind and manage your management. So with Evolve, they came out, they wrote the listing, they sent out a great photographer. There's 1 or 2 angles I didn't like. I thought they didn't capture something. I asked them to come back out. There's a couple things I asked them to put in the listing. They had a regional advisor that said, hey, here's some nightly rates. We do minimum nightly rentals. I don't do a single night. It's got to be 2 nights is a minimum. We do minimum age of 25 just because the type of guest that we really wanted to try to find. They helped us curate that. But then there's other things where they knew Mardi Gras, the big weekend of Mardi Gras, but they don't know some of the parades that start a month before, like the Crew of Chewbacca or Crew de Vue. They didn't know that. I'm not a big sports fan. My wife is a sports nut, but literally she'll tell me, like, I promise you, raise the rates for January 12th, 13th, and 14th, because if the teams get in, then the tournament's going to be here in New Orleans. Sure enough, literally after the games on Sunday, as soon as it ended, we literally got a booking. The next morning, hey, you got a booking last night. They booked it for 3 nights here. So like she's on top of all of that and helping us, like, hey, this is out here. So we still work with them. You know, I don't have to do a lot of the interface with the folks. So to me, it's worked out really, really well. Part of it too is I'm in a tourist area. Like if you're in an area that doesn't get a lot of guests, I mean, a property management company is not going to do that much better than you could do. They might have professional writers, professional photographers, and a call center, but you know, you got to have some traffic. So it's worked out pretty well for me. I've heard mixed messages as well, but I've really enjoyed it for the time I haven't had to put into it. But I still manage those folks. And even with my syndications, I check in on my syndications. I have hired there's a company called We Go Look. I've used We Go Look to send out a looker to do walkarounds of apartment complexes that I've invested in and to take pictures. So the sponsor, the syndicator, will say, hey, we're going to do all this work. Hey, this work's done. Here's a couple pictures. I'll spend the $100 to have someone go out and take photos to actually verify it or check up on it. And, you know, it costs me a little money, a little bit of time, but if you're putting money into deals, like just doing a little bit of follow-up is in your best interest. You still got to manage those folks that are managing your investments for you.
That is huge. That is true. That is true. I'm in the middle of doing that now, so I know what you mean.
Yeah.
So yeah, you said New Orleans. I got to open up my places down there. I forgot that because you guys are getting the national championship and the Saints are into the playoffs, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I got to open up my places. I completely forgot. So, yeah. So man, it's go ahead, Steve.
This has been a great interview. I've learned a lot. I've got a lot of notes going on.
Yeah, me too. The 60 to 70 LTV portfolio, that really hit me. I'm like, now you're making me hold off on the refi. So I'm like, yeah.
Well, I mean, if you have a good opportunity that comes along, maybe you pull out more of that cash and go to a higher LTV so you don't miss that good deal. But, you know, it's all what your risk tolerance is, and that changes over time.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely true. Man.
Sweet. So, Andrew, what is your podcast called, and where can people find it?
Yeah, it's called The House Hacking Podcast. I mean, we are everywhere. We got a YouTube channel. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. You know, go to The House Hacking Podcast. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play. We're in the iTunes, Apple Podcast. Yeah, so look anywhere. It's The House Hacking Podcast. We just had our first episode launched on December 30th. So go and check it out.
Sweet.
Yeah, definitely check him out. I'm always on their IG. He's always posting some good stuff, so definitely follow him.
Where are you at on IG, Andrew?
My account is FIBYREI, FIBYREI, and my personal website is the FIBYREI, which is achieving financial independence through real estate investing.
Have you achieved that?
Back in 2016, I hit what some people call lean fire. So basically, okay. I've got enough between having all my housing and auto costs offset, someone else paying for that, and cash flow, I've got enough to come in to pay the bills where if I didn't like work, I could stop work. I'm still investing in real estate, still do some nonprofit work. That way I can get to what's sort of a fat fire, a really comfortable sort of lifestyle.
Nice. And real quick, too, you said you've been investing since you were 20, right?
Yep.
So you were investing through the crash.
Yep.
How did that affect you?
I was still very small and not really, I didn't go heavy until 2010, 2011. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So luckily I didn't get hurt. I actually had a mortgage company with a business partner in 2006, 2007. luckily, me and my business partner went separate ways, but before the crash. So I didn't get hurt there, and I didn't get hurt in real estate. So I was really, really fortunate. But yeah, a lot of folks got hurt, buying property only for appreciation with negative cash flow, thinking it would never end. And it just didn't make sense. So yeah, I was real fortunate where I didn't get hurt.
Do you see some of the same warning signs happening now?
Yeah, man, it's crazy. Like, you can never really predict it. There's not the subprime loans that were out there, but yeah, I mean, it seems like it might be getting that way. Like I said, when I was selling properties in 2016, when I saw that portfolio, I wouldn't have bought at that price, but it worked for someone else. So, when I start to see that, I don't know, man. And, there used to be this old saying, and this is not a dig at cabbies, but there used to be this old saying, like a New Yorker saying, where like when your cabbie starts giving you stock quotes, the stock market's too hot. And if you look around now, man, it's like, someone started investing in real estate 4 years ago and they've done 12 deals and now they're a real estate guru. And it's like, bro, man, like you just started investing 4 years ago. You're in a rising market. Yes, I'm not discounting what you're doing, but like you've had the wind at your back the whole time. Like, yes, you're doing some right stuff, but
what's easy to survive in a bull market, man.
Yeah, and what's that Mike Tyson quote? Like, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yeah.
It's that same thing. Like, so when I started to see that, like, some folks are like, oh, I just did my 4th deal. And I'm like, dude, I wouldn't have done that deal. Like, I mean, I wish you well. I hope you don't get hurt. But, and every now and then through my website, folks ask me about coaching and stuff. And this was maybe back in the summer. This guy out in California was like, well, if I put my money here, I know I can get 8 to 10% appreciation. And he was asking me to give him some advice about the market there in North Carolina. And he's like, well, unless I can get 10% appreciation, I'm looking at this property. And I was like, well, you're losing $150 a month and just as is. And that's not counting maintenance or CapEx. He's like, well, it should appreciate at least 5 to 10% a year. And I'm like, okay, yes, maybe, but you're losing money every single month as is just from the rent to the mortgage, and that's not counting maintenance. He's like, well, I'm going to go buy new construction then. That way I don't have to worry about maintenance. And I was like, stuff still breaks expectedly. He's like, well, I make good money, so I can afford the negative $100, $200 a month. And I'm just like, okay, this isn't a good fit. Like, we're not going to work together. Like, maybe you'll do well for 2 or 3 years, but then when there's a snap or that pullback, or you lose your job, how are you going to afford those 10 negative cash flowing properties? So like, I'm starting to see more of that. We could go for another decade. Who knows? But like, if you're stupid in a good market, you're not going to be ready to take advantage of deals when the market turns.
Wow. I can't believe anyone would bring that to you to buy up some deals that aren't cash flowing for the back end of it to be for appreciation. I guess that's what people do, though.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew, we thank you very much for hopping on with us. We learned a lot, and we know our fans learned a lot. Where can the fans find you? I mean, you told us your Instagram. Is there any way they can reach you directly?
Yeah, on my website, fibyrea.com, FIBYREI.com. I got a contact form on there. I've got on Instagram, message me on fibyrea. I respond on there. Almost every day I'm on there checking and responding back to folks.
Awesome. Any more questions, Myka?
No, that was it. Thank you for coming on. I'll definitely follow you on Instagram, your House Hacking Podcast, IG. So, yeah, definitely keep it up, and thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, guys, for having me on. And, Steve, man, we're going to connect because we're going to get you on our show for season 2.
Awesome, man. I can't wait.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
All right. Later.
Well,
that was the great Andrew Kerr hopping on with us. It was a great episode. Learned a lot.
Yeah, learned a lot. Really good. Yeah, especially about house hacking. I actually have something to say about my house hacking in Arlington for our next episode. So tune into that because got some crazy news about it. So yeah, house hacking is definitely the way to go. You guys know how Steve's doing it. I did it for about 2 years, so it's definitely a thing to do.
Sweet. And you can find us at liveletthrive.com. Where else, Myka?
Yeah, liveletthrive.com. Follow us on IG. Live Let Thrive on IG, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. We appreciate the love and thanks for being listeners. And
All right.
we are
Adios.
out.
Later.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Live, Let, Thrive. Be sure to tune in next week for all the latest in the world of Airbnb and all that entails. Bye-bye.